All right, good afternoon, everybody. We have a whole bunch of exciting new topics that David Korman and his team have been working on for the new year. There's a lot of nuances, there's a lot of new things that are coming our way with a completely changed market. We are quite spoiled in the real estate industry where, you list properties and you sell properties and they come to fruition very easily, and things have been a little bit different. So I'm very eager to listen to all of his great webinars that he's created for this year. But this is specifically for pre-construction and issues that might arise with the deposits, how to safeguard the buyer, how to make sure that they are refundable deposits because we're seeing that quite often in the market right now. So over to you, David. Um,
Hey,
and
thanks,
welcome.
Sabiha. Always great to be with this group, and we were just reminiscing about how great the gala was, and how much fun it is for me and Jonathan Taimur to be able to be there and attend with you. And it was great seeing everybody and helping celebrate some great accomplishments last year. So today we're going to talk about pre-construction perils. I was just looking at this title, pre-construction perils, safeguarding buyers and their deposits, and it sounds like negative, sort of. Maybe we have to redo it. So the first thing I want to do is deliver a positive message. Okay, we're going to talk about how you're going to protect buyers and when things go bad and things we should look out for. But the message I want you to get as realtors is you should be doing pre-construction. It's a great opportunity. And if you're not doing it, and you've only been in the resale market, then I'm encouraging you to do it. Because it's, first of all, it's different. You'll see that over the next hour. It's very different, but it's not that complicated. Once you do one, you'll be able to do many of them. And it's a great way to, it's a great item to add to your portfolio that you have an ability to do that. Because you have certain people that always want resale properties. Sometimes there's no inventory available to them. So why not consider some new construction? And if you're going to do it, then just understand how to do it, what you should look out for, and what some of the potential landmines are. So that's what I want to talk about it. So even though we're talking about some of the negative aspects and the things we got to be careful about, it's only to protect our mutual buyer clients, me as a lawyer, you as an agent. But don't take anything to hopefully to discourage you from doing it or to discourage buyers from doing it, because for many buyers, this is a great thing to do. It's a great opportunity to buy a place that they're going to live in, or if they want to buy it as an investment, whatever. So don't discount pre-construction just because you're not familiar with it. So this is your opportunity to get with it. So that's my first message. My second message that I want to give everybody before I start this presentation is today is February 27th, and today is election day in Ontario. So please, if you have not voted already, I have already voted this morning. If you have not voted, please get out there and vote. You got till 9 o'clock. If you have voted, congratulations. I don't care. I'll say I don't care how you vote, because it's true. Make up your own mind, do your own homework, figure out how you want to vote. But it's so important to exercise your right to vote. Okay, we are people that got here before us worked very hard to create this country and this province to give us these opportunities, and we're so fortunate to live in a democracy. So the best way we can honor that and participate is to exercise our right to vote. So I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. That's up to you. I have my own opinions, but I encourage, regardless of who you're voting for, get out there and exercise your right to vote, and encourage all your friends and family to do the same. So that's my unsolicited.
I so agree with that, David. And we were talking about that before we started recording the session. And I will tell you, all my friends, I'm not an extremely emotional person, but to be honest, today when I went in, and this happens every time I go to vote, I actually have like this, frog in my throat. And I always walk in feeling so privileged to be able to do that. And, federal elections are coming around the corner. Provincial elections are on their way today. Like David said, it's from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Please take out that minute to, if you don't have your voter's card, take your driver's license to the nearest poll booth and just go ahead and vote, because it's really, I was feeling so fortunate, being a woman being a first generation immigrant in a country, to be able to do so and knowing that my vote would count, is it's an honor. You know, it's not a privilege, it should be a right, but it's an honor alongside it. So don't just let it go. Don't take it it's not unimportant.
Yeah, I agree. And I know regardless, I'll be sitting watching the results tonight. And I know there's one result that's really going to upset me because they always tell you what the percentage of voter turnout is. And, and it might end up being 40% or, I always think, why wouldn't it be 80%, 90%? But it's always 40, 50, 60 in a good election. And it's ridiculous. And then we spend the rest of the 4 years complaining that we're not getting certain things. We want improvements. And I don't care if it's a municipal election, provincial, federal, we complain about everything, but this is our opportunity to do something about it. And, so exercise your right, make a difference, and encourage everybody else. And I'm not saying this, I'm only telling you as my friends and colleagues to do this. I'm telling the same thing to my wife and my kids and my grandkids. My grandkids are too young, but we discuss voting and elections anyways. I'm encouraging all of them to do the same thing, and I always do, and I always make sure that I vote. I'm on the losing side of elections more often than I'm on the winning side somehow, because I always think I got a better idea. But so be it. I still always feel good that I exercise my right to vote and encourage you to do so. So with that, thank you for attending. And anybody want to talk about pre-construction? Okay, let's get into this. Let's skip the past. So I'll use all my time that I usually talk about David Gorski in this slide. I used up talking about elections, so I'm not going to say anything nice about him today. So let's get right into this. So a couple things I just want to go through just so you understand some differences when we're dealing with pre-construction. Okay, so there's a different process when the pre-construction's for a condominium and when it's for a freehold. So I just want to explain a little bit about that. And mostly it's because the condominium system is different for new construction. So as you know, it takes a long time to build, especially a high-rise condominium building. Oftentimes, or more often than not, the building is physically ready to be occupied by the buyers, but the builder has not completed the registration process with the government to register the condominium. It's a very comprehensive process to get a condominium registered. So the government many years ago created this system under the Condominium Act to allow people to move in as soon as the building is physically ready to be occupied, even though we can't give title to the buyer because the condominium itself hasn't been registered yet. So we have this two closing system. So the first system, when it's physically ready to be occupied, we have an interim occupancy period. Okay, so we have an occupancy, an occupancy closing where the builder says, here, you can, here's the keys, you can get in, you can start living there. And in exchange for that, the buyer is going to pay a monthly occupancy fee during this occupancy period until we get to the final closing. So the occupancy fee they're going to be paying has three components to it. It's an estimate of what the property taxes would be for that unit, an estimate of what the maintenance or common expenses would be, and interest on the balance that the buyer still owes the builder, because they're not paying the full amount to the builder because they can't usually, because they need their mortgage financing to do it. And their mortgage can't be advanced until you can register a mortgage as security, and you can't register a mortgage until the title's transferred to the buyer. So we can't get the mortgage funds. So until we do the final closing, we're paying this interim occupancy fee to the builder. Now, the interest rate on the balance due closing is not a negotiated amount. It's an amount determined by the government under the regulations of the Condominium Act. They figure out what it should be and they post those rates, and that's the rate that's going to be paid. So we do that. So there's no transfer of title, there's no mortgage registered, and then that could be for a period of a month, it could be 3 months, 6 months, it could be a year sometimes, until the building is finally registered, and then there'll be a final closing, and that's when title can be transferred from the builder to the buyer, and at that point, the buyer can get their mortgage registered, so the balance of the purchase price is paid at that point in time. And now the buyer's no longer paying that occupancy fee, and instead they're going to be paying their own mortgage lender their mortgage interest. They're going to be paying the monthly common expenses, and they'll be paying the property taxes from that point on. So we have these two staged closings under when it's a condominium. So we don't have that in office. So you just have to be aware of that in the process. Okay. So the most important thing in pre-construction is to know, if any of you have never seen an agreement of purchase and sale before, it's completely different than a resale treb form or a RIA form that you're probably used to. It doesn't look like it at all. It's probably 15, 20 pages long with a lot of fine print, a whole bunch of schedules attached to it. Every builder does their own agreement of purchase and sale. It's always tailor-made to a particular project that they're doing. Now, having said that, there's a lot of commonality to these agreements, and they're all looking at each other's agreements, and they're all taking certain things and evolving sort of at the same pace, and they have a lot of the same elements to them. But it's important for you as a realtor to be going through and be comfortable with that, and for us as lawyers to be involved in the process as well. And this is where our teamwork is really important. We've got the same mutual buyer client. Buyers on pre-construction need an awful lot of hand-holding through this process to understand what they're signing up for, what their rights are, and all the different things that they have to look out for, and all the what I'll refer to as perils or minefields in these agreements of purchase and sale. So the most important thing you could do as a realtor, if you take nothing else away from this hour, is to make sure your agreement purchase sale has a condition for lawyer review. Okay. Now, if you're in a construction office and they're saying, no, we're not allowing that, then your backup position would be, well, then let me have a copy of the agreement. So we'll review it with our lawyer. My client will review it with his lawyer before we submit an offer. Give us a day, give us half a day, whatever it is, but we'll try and get it done quickly. And we'll review it before we submit the offer. But obviously, it's better if you can get a condition on lawyer review in the agreement of purchase and sale. Now, if it's a condominium, you don't need that condition in there, because the Condominium Act has a specific provision in it that allows for a 10-day cooling off period. So the buyer can sign an unconditional agreement of purchase and sale with the builder, and the buyer still has the statutory right to have a 10-day cooling off period from the time that they receive the signed agreement of purchase and sale and all disclosure documents. They got 10 days to back out, no matter for whatever reason. They don't have to justify it. They change their mind, or they might find something specific in it. So during that 10-day cooling off period, make sure the agreement gets to a lawyer to review. And we can look for all the things. I'm going to talk about all the things that we're actually looking for when we're reviewing that. Okay, so condo, automatic 10-day cooling off period. Not condo, get a condition for lawyer review. If they don't give you that, then try and get a blank copy of the agreement of purchase and sale for review before your client submits an offer. Because the whole idea is we want to make sure that our mutual buyer client is going to make the best informed decision that they can make. So we want to look at all these issues. So what are some of the things we're looking out for? One of the biggest things we look for in these agreements is adjustments. Every builder does it in a similar fashion. They might be selling this property for $1 million, the purchase price $1 million. But there's a whole bunch of provisions in there in the fine print that allows the builder to have certain adjustments that are all in addition to the purchase price. So part of what we want to do when we're reviewing it, and I say we, it's you and me, you as the realtor, me as the lawyer, we want to pull all these adjustments out, see what they are, see what the potential costs are, get some certainty as those costs, and see if it still makes sense for our client to go ahead with this. So that's a major focus of our review. Another thing is we want to make sure that HST is included in the purchase price as opposed to being in addition to the purchase price. Now, this shouldn't come as news to you, but for some, unfortunately, it might be news that HST is applicable to residential real estate. That's the law. And somebody say, but no, I do resale transactions all the time, and we don't pay HST on top of the purchase price. Well, the reason you don't, because the Act says HST is payable on all residential real estate, unless there's an exception. There happens to be an exception in the Excise Tax Act for resale residential transactions. And that's why you're not, because there's an exception. So on new construction, HST is payable. Now, the way most builders deal with it, the way they market it and they put it into the agreements of purchase and sale, is they'll usually have HST is included in the purchase price. So if it's $1 million purchase price, there should be something in the agreement that says that includes the HST, because the HST is payable. The builder will have to pay HST to the builder on that $1 million. Okay. So first task is let's make sure that it's included and not in addition to the purchase price. Most builders do it that it's included, but we want to check it. We want to make sure that that's there. Another important issue we're always looking out for is whether or not buyers have rights to assign the agreement of purchase and sale. Even if their intention when they sign the agreement is, oh, this isn't going to be built for 3 years and we're going to move in and we intend to use it. I don't really have to assign. I don't really care about an assignment because my intention is to move in. But sometimes circumstances change during those 3 years, and maybe those 3 years turn into 4 years or 5 years because there's been delays, and they can't close, or there's some reason someone, they get moved out of town for business or whatever. There's a million reasons could come up. Do they have a right to assign? So it's something we always want to look at. Now, most agreements of purchase and sale say a buyer has no right to assign unless they get the prior written consent of the builder. And then sometimes there's conditions attached to that. Sometimes we can negotiate some of those conditions, but we want to take a look at that. It's really critical for us to figure out the deposit schedule. When are deposits paid? How much are they paid? How much is payable each time? And who is it going to be paid to? And I'm going to be talking in a little while about the risk of deposits and making sure we do everything we can to protect those deposits to make sure that buyers can get them back if things go for the worse. Okay. And we always want to look at conditions and things like that. So we're looking in that when we're reviewing agreements of purchase and sale. Now, a little more specific, what a lawyer is generally looking for when we're reviewing agreements is, I mentioned already, there's a whole bunch of closing costs or adjustments that are being passed on, which would include things like the enrollment in the Tarion program, utility connections and installations of meters and things like that. Any increases or new development charges or other levies, education levies, transit levies, things like that could be imposed. A lot of those costs are passed on to the builder, passed on by the builder to the buyer, and that potentially could be thousands and thousands of dollars. So the exercise we go through is to first of all try and identify what these costs are. We want to put numbers to them as much as possible so we can make an informed decision. If we can delete them, we try and negotiate for them to be deleted. If we can't delete them, we at least try to cap them so they won't exceed certain amounts. Again, we're trying to get the buyer to a position of comfort so they know there are these potential costs in addition to the purchase price, and to still make it affordable, and can they still go through the transaction. So we have to try and take the uncertainty and change it into certain certainties. Okay, so that's the exercise we're going through. We also are looking for any vagueness in completion timelines, things that have to happen. I've already mentioned the ability to assign an agreement. We're also looking at ability to lease out during occupancy periods if it's a condominium, things like that. What are those rights? What are those conditions that are applicable in assignments? And I can talk about assignments for 2 hours on its own, which I have in the past, and I'm sure I'll do again in the future, because there's all kinds of things we have to look out just on assignments. So what I want to talk a little bit more about, though, is there's a lot of things in the news, that we've heard over recent months about builder defaults. What happens when a builder defaults? Why does a builder default? What should we be thinking about? What should we be concerned about? And any buyer should, before they go through on a project, because remember, resale, you're buying what you see for the most part. The closing's going to be in a month, and 6 weeks, and 2 months, and 3 months sometimes. The property's already there. It's just parties agreeing to a price and closing certain terms and then moving towards the closing. When we're pre-construction, it's different. There's uncertainty. We're buying from plans. It's vacant land. There isn't a shovel in the ground. So it's imperative on you as an agent to help your buyer to do some research on the builder, to get whatever information you can about their history, their financial stability, past projects, what's their reputation, do they build on time, do they go over budget, do they, what's their sales record, whatever you can find out. Are they getting in trouble all the time with the Terran warranty program? Are they honoring their obligations to fix and repair things even post-closing? So your role becomes enhanced in helping a buyer do as much due diligence they can about the builder themselves. And some builders are better than others, just like some real estate agents are better than others, and some lawyers are better than others. Some builders are better than others. So we want to just do our homework as much as we can. Builders default on agreements, and it always makes the news. It's always a big deal. And sometimes it's for different reasons. Sometimes there's financial instability. They don't have enough funds. There's been some poor financial management. They usually can't build anything and until they get their financing, their construction financing for the project. And most agreements with new projects will have the builder will have a right to get out if they can't secure their financing for project construction. And when they go to their lenders for construction financing, usually the lenders impose some sort of threshold on them, like you have to have 80% of your sales completed on this before we start financing or funding any of the construction. So you can't put a shovel in the ground until you've got 80% of your units sold, or it might be 75%, or it might be 90%, but it's usually something specific in their mortgage commitment that they have to comply with. And if they can't get to that threshold, then the project's not going to go ahead. So sometimes that's a reason why these projects don't go ahead. Sometimes the projects start and the builders run into all kinds of cost overruns because the materials cost went up. They didn't estimate properly. They planned to spend a certain amount on lumber, and they were going to buy it in February, and they didn't get around to buying it until March. And in between then, President Trump in the U.S. imposed a tariff on lumber, and now the costs are 25% higher on lumber. So now they've got cost overruns. Things happen. Okay, some are unforeseen, some should have been foreseen. Sometimes there's regulatory changes, there's all kinds of issues, but sometimes certain builders run into it. Some builders are better than others about anticipating these things. Sometimes there's just market downturns like we're in right now, and they're just a victim of timing, or they're in a declining market, reduced buyer interest. Maybe they had, their sales were going like gangbuster and they got the first 50, 60% done in record time, and all of a sudden the market turns and they just can't quite get to that 75% threshold. And now the project's in limbo. Things happen. Sometimes it's just for market conditions. Sometimes there's mismanagement. Different things happen. So there's consequences to buyers when builders default. If there's delays, it affects their ability to move on with their life and have some certainty about when they're going to move in. And sometimes things get delayed too far and they can't wait, so they have to make other arrangements. They got to buy another property. They got to try and get out, but they have the right to assign. There's some uncertainty. So just delays in itself give rise to certain anxiety amongst buyers. There's always a risk of cancellation. The project could be terminated altogether because the builder didn't meet those thresholds and they just pull the plug. And now the buyer been waiting around for 2 years. Now the project's not going ahead. If they would have bought a different project 2 years ago that went ahead, maybe they'd already be in. Maybe it's gone up in value, et cetera, et cetera. And we all know that whenever things go bad, they look for someone to blame, and it's going to be you. And if it's not you, it's going to be me. It's going to be the builder. It's going to be you. It's going to be me. It's never going to be their fault. So we always want to get as much information as we can to our mutual clients so they can make the best decisions they can make. And when these projects do go bad, we want to make sure they're protected as much as possible for their deposits. At least if it doesn't go ahead, are they getting their money back so they can use that deposit money to buy something else? And if you've treated them professionally through this whole process, they're still going to use you to buy the next property. They got to live somewhere. So we always want to be working towards that we're on the same side, the same team. We're getting all the information. We're making the best informed decisions that are available. And so there are certain recourses that a buyer can turn to. Usually just suing a builder is not something that that they look to. There's other protections that we look to first, starting with their protection under Tarion, which is the Ontario New Home Warranties Act, which is backed by the provincial government. And that gives certain protections, and I'll give you a little more detail on that in a minute. So we want to point them to where they're going to get some assistance if they have to pursue a claim for certain issues, and then also deposits, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute as well. So in terms of the warranty protection that's offered by Tarion, first of all, this isn't an optional thing. A builder cannot contract out of providing these warranty protections. They are mandatory and have to be included in every pre-construction, whether it's condo or freehold. And even more specifically, every pre-construction agreement, purchase and sale has to have a Schedule A, we refer to as a Tarion Schedule A, and a Tarion Schedule B that has to be attached to the agreements. The Tarion Schedule A outlines a whole bunch of rights and protection for buyers under Tarion, starting with what happens when it sets out the timing, the closing dates that are available, and the builder's rights to extend the closing time. And builders have the rights, a limited right to unilaterally extend closing times up for a period of time as long as they give proper notice. And this is all set out in that Schedule A. And once they use up that limited unilateral extension right, then they can still try and extend, but it opens up different rights that a buyer then has. A buyer has the right to say, no, I don't want to, I'm opting out. I want my deposit money. I want to terminate. I don't have to accept it. And then there's other rights for delayed compensation that I'll talk about in a second too. And this is all in Schedule A. And it also talks about the warranty coverages that are available that are mandatory, again, that a builder cannot contract out of. So there's a 1-year warranty for defects in workmanship and materials. There's a 2-year warranty for major systems like HVAC, electrical, plumbing. And then there's a 7-year warranty for structural defects. Okay. And a builder cannot contract out of these. They're available on every single project. Okay. And the Schedule A will also go through, there's a claims process for dealing this. What do you do if you're going to file a claim under Tarion? So it goes through that and describes what those timelines are, et cetera, and the process for going through that. And there's also a lot of more detailed information available online if you just go to the Tarion website, and you can refer your clients to Tarion website, because they should familiarize themselves with that whole process, and and also get the lawyer involved to explain things too. So that's the first area of protection that when you're buying in pre-construction, you've got these Tarion protection rights that you do not have on a resale transaction. There's no such thing of these type of rights on a resale transaction. So it's unique to pre-construction in Ontario. Now, part of it is there's a limited amount of compensation that's available to buyers if there's delayed closings. Okay, now they have to go through a process. Any builder wants to delay closing, they have a certain right, like I said, a limited amount of unilateral closings. They just give notice. We're supposed to close February 27th. We can't close then. We're closing March 27th. Okay, the buyer can't do anything about it because it's within, as long as they got proper notice within the time frame they're supposed to get the notice by, and it doesn't exceed 120 days. And in the total, the builder has 120 days to give unilateral extension notice. Buyer has no right to get out of it. Once they exceed that, the buyer has an opportunity, if there's further extensions, to get out and terminate it, like I said. But if they go ahead and complete it, the buyer might also be eligible for this delayed closing compensation. And there's limits on it, and there's a process as well. So they can get up to $7,500 to cover them for the cost because of the delay, because they incurred costs for housing, storage, moving costs, things like that. But they're only eligible for that. We've got to go through the process, count the days, see the notices, et cetera, to see if they're eligible for that. Because, as long as builders giving proper notice up to a certain point, there may not be any delayed compensation, but at some point it could kick in. So we look at every situation on a fact-by-fact situation. What were the closing dates? What were the notices? When was it given? Count the days, how much notice was given, et cetera, et cetera. Was there further notices? We have to look at each one and calculate it. There's no simple way to do it. And then the buyers have to keep receipts so they can justify their claim. Here's what I had to spend on storage. Here's I have to move it to a hotel, whatever it is. So they keep that. So we want to make sure they know that that's available to them. There's some protection for delayed compensation as well. And what's critical in this is oftentimes we get clients, where a builder will get notice they've used up maybe their unilateral extension rights, and the builder says, we still can't close. We need another month to close this thing. So your new closing date is going to be May 27th. Here's an amendment to the agreement of purchase and sale. Please sign this, send it back. So we'll change your closing date till March 27th. I never want a buyer to sign that. You should never let them sign something like that either without taking it to the lawyer and having us review it, because we want to make sure they've used up all their unilateral rights, and we don't want them to do that, because as soon as they sign that, they're changing the closing date to March 27th, which means the builder's rights to extend start all over again. They can unilaterally extend for 120 days from that date. The buyer might lose their rights for any delayed compensation because they agreed in writing to a new closing date. So we don't want them to do that. We'd rather them not agree to that date usually and let the builder just give notice that your new date's going to be March 27th, because at least there's some other protection that might be available to the buyer for things like delayed closing compensation or the right maybe to get out of the deal. So we want to take a look at it and see all the notices and do a calculation and figure out what the buyer's options and rights might be. So keep that in mind. Anytime your client's asked to sign an amendment to change a closing date, don't let them sign it without running it past the lawyer that's acting for them on the transaction. Now, we're still talking about some protection for buyers when a builder defaults. So one of the most important things about builders defaulting is, does the buyer have the right to get their deposit back? Because that's going to be critical. They need that money back. They're going to need it to buy the next property, whether they're going to buy a resale or another new construction. They need their deposit monies back. So we got to make sure that when they give the deposits, when they're signing the agreement of purchase and sale, that they're doing it properly and make sure that they're properly protected in case the builder defaults and they want to get the money back. So the first place we look to is Tarion, because Tarion ensures, again, this is government-backed a program. It ensures the reimbursement of certain eligible deposits if the builder cancels or goes bankrupt. So we want to be very careful about any monies that we give to a builder because there's always that risk. But there's some protection. I'll show you the amounts and the coverage. So for Tarion, anything over and above that, we want to make sure we're not giving it to a builder. We want to make sure we're giving it to the builder's lawyer in trust, so that funds, those are held in trust. So the other thing, if there's a default by the builder, we want to make sure that the buyer understands their access to the various warranty benefits that are there for incomplete work, things aren't done properly, things weren't completed properly, etc. There's a process to take them through. We want to make sure that our mutual clients are going to understand that process to go through their protection rights there. So let's go back, talk a little bit more about how the deposit protection works in Ontario on new construction. So it's the Tarion Warranty Corporation that provides this protection. It's different for freeholds and it's different in condominiums. So deposits on freeholds are typically held in trust accounts by the builder's lawyer. Now, there might be a certain amount that the builder is saying, no, I want a certain amount paid to me. The rest you pay to my lawyer. They'll put it in their trust account. We got to be very careful with exactly what we're doing and paying to who. On a condominium project, it's a little bit different. The deposits are protected under the Condominium Act. There's provisions specifically in the Act that ensure the funds will be used just for that project. They're held in a trust system. We get certificates from the lawyer acting for the builder, confirming that the deposit funds are being held pursuant to the provisions of the Condominium Act, and those certificates are issued. So there's more deposit protection and different deposit protection when it's a condominium. So back to freehold for a second. There's limitations on the amount that are protected under Tarion. So if the home has a purchase price of $600,000 or less, the deposit protection is limited to $60,000. So, there's been a lot of market increases, and there aren't a lot of properties out there that are under 600,000, but there still are some condo units, etc. So there's a limit, $60,000 of protection for deposits on those freehold homes. When it's above 600,000, the maximum coverage is 10% of the purchase price, but up to a maximum of $100,000. So we never want our clients to give more than $100,000 because they're not going to have protection for that. Okay. And if they're going to be giving more than 100,000, we want to make sure that they're going not to the builder because they won't get any protection for that. But at the very least, we want that to go to a builder's lawyer, a trust account, and it's a reputable law firm that'll be holding that money in trust. But our preference is let's not exceed the 100,000 if we could avoid it. If we have to, because they're demanding, we want to make sure we're giving it to the lawyer and not to the builder. Condominium protection. The deposit protect up to $20,000. So that's the first $20,000. The first $20,000 can go to a builder because there'll be protection for that $20,000 under the Condominium Act. If the builder goes bankrupt or absconds, they'll get the $20,000 back. Anything above $20,000 has to be paid as deposit pursuant to the provisions of the Condominium Act, which goes to the lawyer acting for the builder. And that lawyer will be issuing certificates that it's being held in trust pursuant to the provisions of the Condominium Act. And if it's done that way, and the builder absconds, or goes bankrupt, or goes into receivership, the buyer will get that money back. There's a process, but they'll get that money back. Okay. So our collective focus, we want to make sure we're taking a look at what does the agreement say, how much of the deposits, who's getting it, how's it being paid, whether it's freehold or condominium, make sure we're protecting them. So if it does go bad, they can get it back. So here's just a slide talking about the risk of the deposit. If the builder goes bankrupt, doesn't finish the project, or cancels, there's always a risk of a buyer losing their deposit. So we want to make sure that we've got the protection. So we want to make sure there's the maximum Tarion deposit coverage we can get, and anything beyond that, we want to make sure it's in a lawyer's trust account. So there's an ability to get it back. And to get it back, you go through a process to get it back. Now, I just recently went through with a few clients on a project that went into receivership, and the receiver, when these goes into receiver, the receiver is always doing an evaluation. If the project near completion, they might say, well, let's try and get it funded and complete it and honor the existing contracts. Sometimes the receiver, after evaluating, says, no, we're not going to go ahead with the project, and we're going to terminate all these agreements of purchase and sale. And then if that's the case, then the deposits are going to be refunded to the buyers, and you go through a process for them to get it back. Now, I had one recently where they had about $100,000 or so that was fully protected because it was deposits were paid properly. But then the buyer went ahead and ordered certain extras and upgrades and gave $20,000 odd paid directly to the builder to pay for certain extras and upgrades that they ordered. That money they don't get back because the builder went into receivership. There's no money available for them to get that back. So they got all the deposits that they paid back. Unfortunately, they didn't come to us to get our advice on how to make payment for those extras and upgrades, because we would have told them, do not pay it to the builder. You can agree and order those things, but you're going to pay the money to the builder's lawyer in trust. But they didn't, they didn't come to us in advance. So unfortunately, we did what we could to try and help them get their money back, but that money just wasn't available. But what they did pay on their basic deposit, they got all that back. So a very important issue when projects do go bad. Now, the one thing we all want to try and avoid is litigation. Litigation is extremely uncertain. It's extremely costly, even if you're on the right side of things, or you think you're on the right side of things. It's not a good process to go through. So we're always trying to avoid litigation we can. But sometimes we have to bring in the hired guns, the big litigation guys to come in and help resolve situations. Now, if it's a buyer that's defaulting, the builder's first position is always going to be, the buyer defaulted, whether it's on closing or it might be well in advance of closing, but they didn't comply with things that were in their agreement of purchase and sale. They didn't make their deposits on on time or meet deadlines they were supposed to. They didn't secure financing and provide evidence of their financing to the builder with an agreed upon timeline. So a buyer can default well in advance of closing. Maybe they're defaulting just on an assignment provision because they tried to list the property to assign it to somebody, and there's a prohibition in the agreement purchase says you can't assign it without the consent of the builder. So now they're in default of their agreement. So any breach by a buyer would give the builder the right to say, hey, we're terminating, agreement's over, and we're forfeiting your deposit, and we're probably reserving our rights to sue you for other damages because we're going to sell to somebody else. We might sell for less. We might come after you, Mr. Defaulting Buyer. So that's always a builder's right to keep the deposit and sue for damages. Okay, now we have clients that get into pickles. It's not their intention to default. Certain situations arise. So we're always trying to help our buyer clients. If we can, we try and negotiate extensions. If we can, we try and negotiate anything that'll prevent a builder from terminating. We're trying to do that. Or if they're going to terminate, can we negotiate to get the deposit monies back and not expose the client to potential other damages? So there's things that we have to get involved with. At some point in time, it's going to sometimes get out of the hands of the real estate lawyer, and it's time to get this in the hands of a litigation lawyer. And we have 4 or 5 litigation lawyers that we really like, getting good results for our clients, and we'll refer our clients on at a certain point to a litigation lawyer because because they may have to jump in and seek a court order if necessary, or defend a court process if necessary. So we try and avoid it, and we'll take it as far as we can, but sometimes we have to bring them in. And anybody that's ever experienced litigation knows it's not a great process. Litigation lawyers will want a large retainer right up front. They're always going to tell you, they think they might win, but their odds are there's always some uncertainty, and it's tough going in. And even when you've got most of the facts or law on your side, there's still some uncertainty, and you're always better having a negotiated result than a litigated result for the most part. So we always keep that in mind. Now, I just want to touch on HST again. I mentioned before about HST being payable on new construction, and that's payable, it's part of the purchase price. It's just a question of whether it's going to be paid to the government. It's a question of how the builder is going to treat it. Is it included in the purchase price, which most builders will do because it's better for marketing purposes, or it's an addition to the purchase? So that's one issue. A totally separate issue is the availability of the HST new housing rebate. So there'll be a clause in every agreement purchase and sale where it's basically a rep and warranty from the buyer saying to the builder that I will be eligible for the new housing rebate. I'll apply for it on closing, and I will assign my rights to that rebate to you, Mr. Builder. So let me put dollars to it to just a little easier to explain it. So let's say we have $1 million purchase price, and let's just say the HST rebate that's available there that could be available would be $24,000. So the builder is saying, I want $1,024,000. So I'll get $1 million from you on closing, Mr. Buyer. And if you're eligible for that new housing rebate, you assign it to me, I'll get $24,000 from the government. So I get my $1,024,000. That clause in the agreement will also say, if the buyer is not eligible for the rebate, the buyer agrees to pay me the $24,000 in addition to the purchase price. So the builder is saying, either way, I'm getting $1,024,000. I'm either getting the $24,000 from the government, or I'm going to get it from the buyer. So now the question you're all asking, well, what makes a buyer eligible for that new housing rebate? And it'll depend on the facts, obviously. But basically, a buyer would be eligible for that rebate if they're buying it to move in themselves as their primary place of residence, or it's for an immediate blood relative. And on closing, they'll be signing a sworn document, a statutory declaration, an affidavit to the builder saying, I'm moving in myself, or my adult daughter named Mary Smith is moving in, and here's the information in support of that application. So I'll tell you this, though. There's also a clause, or a part of that language in that clause will give a builder the right that if the builder is not sure that the buyer is going to be eligible for the new housing rebate, the builder might say, I'm not going to give you credit for that 24,000 on closing because I'm not sure if you're entitled to it. I don't want to play the game. So you pay me the 24,000 on closing in addition to the purchase price. And then you can apply, Mr. Buyer, you can apply after closing. It's the second we close, you can apply to the government for that rebate. And if you're eligible for it, you'll get the 24,000 back from the government. If you're not eligible for it, so be it. I got my $24,000. Okay, so this comes up sometimes. Anytime a builder gets a whiff or a smell that the buyer might not be eligible, maybe they're not really moving in, maybe it's an investment property, maybe the buyer's not sure if he's going to live there themselves or if he's going to rent it out, but somewhere in the process they got wind that there's some uncertainty there. The builders are going to turn on the buyer and say, we're not taking a risk here. Pay us the rebate on closing and you apply on your own. So we run into that. And that creates a hardship for certain buyers because they got to come up with the 24,000 on closing. Even if they might get it back a month or two later from the government, they still got to come up with the 24,000 first on closing. And that creates a hardship. Now we'll see that almost any time a buyer says, I'm even though I bought this 3 years ago and I was going to move in myself, now I'm not sure because of the timing if I want to move in. So will you consent to an assignment? Once a buyer asks for a consent to an assignment, even if the builder says, no, I'm not consenting, the builder might also say, not only am I not consenting, but I'm not going to give you the rebate either because I don't think you're going to live there because you're looking to assign it. So I think you're going to close maybe, and then right afterwards, you're going to try and sell this property to somebody else. You're not really going to move in. Even though you might sign documents saying you are going to move in, I'm not sure you're really going to do it. And I don't want to take that risk. Therefore, I'm not going to give you the benefit of that rebate. So we run into that sometimes. We always got to be careful as to what that assignment language says in an agreement, a purchase and sale. And we got to have that discussion with a client anytime they're thinking of assigning it, because it might affect their rights to that HST new housing rebate as well. Now, just to finish that conversation before I move on, if it is an investment property where they wouldn't be entitled to that rebate, and they do lease it out after closing, the buyer can apply for a different rebate, which is the rental rebate. If it's a bona fide lease that they enter into with a third party and it's a real lease and it's for at least a 1 year term, they can go through an application process and they might get that $24,000 back under the rental rebate program. So again, it's just a cash flow thing. They got to lay out the money on closing, and a few months later, they might get it back from the government. But we always want to give explanations and guidance to our clients and understand what their intention is with this property. All right, so let's move on. Some final closing remarks, some key points in pre-construction and protecting our mutual clients. Number one is the importance of legal advice. I said that at the outset. Make sure you include us in the process. It has to be reviewed by lawyers, knowing what to look for and having an ability to negotiate. And we have, because we do a lot of these things in our office, just, you guys are very familiar with us. So we do a lot of these things, and we have relationships with a lot of the builders and the builders' lawyers. So we know we're not asking for unreasonable things. We're asking for reasonable things. We're reviewing agreements properly. And we're just trying to do a proper job with our clients. So make sure if it's not us, that they've got somebody that's giving them proper legal advice and they're involved in the process. Okay. Number two, make sure they're getting the proper deposit protection. We got to look at what the language says in those agreements and the timeliness of the deposits. Make sure they're paying their deposits on time so they don't get into a breach situation. And we always want to make sure those deposits are going to be protected one way or the other. I'm already talked before about the due diligence that we have to help our clients do, and it's more you than me. In terms of doing research of the builders, the reputation, their financial stability, et cetera, et cetera. We get asked about those things too because we do have experiences with certain builders, certain projects, and some of it's the ability to get projects completed. Some it's just with questions about what happens after closing. Is this builder good about following up with all the defects in workmanship and completing the project, or do they get in trouble with Tarion all the time? So so we weigh in on some of those things as well, but that's an important thing. And we always want to go after these hidden costs and adjustments and make sure we can reduce them, eliminate them, And at the very least, make sure that we explain them and that our client can see what all these potential costs are so they can make the informed decision. Assignment clauses I've already touched on a bunch of times, the importance of that. Just asking for a consent, builders pass on costs. Well, a consent, if you pay me an assignment fee, and you also have to pay a fee to my lawyer, for consenting to it. Sometimes those assignment costs, we've seen it on the same project, same builder with one purchaser client of ours was charged a $3,000 assignment fee. And a week later, we asked for an assignment for another buyer, same project, same builder. And they said, yeah, we'll consent, but we want $55,000. And we couldn't get them to budge off it. And the explanation we got back is we can charge whatever we want because the agreement didn't say we can only charge a certain amount. It says we can charge an assignment fee. And the first one we gave to for $3,000 because that's sort of our standard. But we want $55,000 from this guy because we don't trust this buyer. We don't like this buyer. He's given us all kinds of heartache through the whole process. And he's been lying to us. And if he really wants that assignment right, we'll give it to him, but it's going to cost him $55,000. And our client agreed to pay it because it was in his best interests to assign this and just make a less. In those days, he was making a profit still. Now clients are more interested in just getting their money out, and then sometimes on these projects, but just want to get the consent done at a reasonable cost. Number 6, we want to go through rights when a builder defaults, like we were talking about, make sure we guide them through their warranty protection, things like that. And so we want to help them through that process. When we're on a condo project, we want to make sure that we're focusing on the occupancy process, this two-stage closing, and they understand their obligations and what they're going to be paying during the occupancy period. So that they're aware of that. They're not being surprised by anything on the occupancy closing. We're always looking at market conditions, and this is where your role is really critical because you guys have your thumb on this, and this is where it's a benefit to be part of Sutton Summit because you're not an island. You've got a whole system behind you. You've got David, you got Sabiha, and you've got relationships on different projects that they're establishing for your group to give you certain information and what's available on specific projects and what's going on generally. So take advantage of the resources that you've got right in-house because your information that you've got on the market fluctuations and the feasibility of assignments and things like that are critical to your buyer. So use the resources that you've got right in-house for these things. The closing readiness, making sure we got all the documents, the mortgage approvals, and the mortgage approval that they get is legit. These days, we have a lot of buyers that are running into problem. They got pre-approved for a mortgage, but the pre-approval says the lender has the right to do an appraisal right before closing. And now they are appraising these pre-construction right before closing, and they're not worth, on the appraisal values are way below the agreed purchase price. And the lender is saying, we're not giving you 80% of the purchase price, we're giving you 80% of the appraisal value. And now the buyer's scrambling to make up the difference. So we always want you to be involved in the mortgage approval process and point these things out. If we can eliminate that appraisal, great. If not, we want to make sure the buyer is aware of it and they've got resources to come up with a difference. And we're running into a lot of that these days with clients that just aren't getting as much mortgage financing as they thought they were going to get because the values in some of these pre-construction projects have gone down. So here's just a bit of a recap of the crucial role that you as realtors play in this pre-construction process. And there's a lot of complexities. This is so different from resale. Resale has its own complexities and its own intricacies, and you might be pros in that. I want you to become professional and understand all the issues here and help your client navigate through these complexities, to understand the market, to understand builder relationships, be part of it, and pay attention to it. You play a real crucial role on pre-construction because there's so many of these issues. It's such a minefield to get it through. And I don't want any of this to be discouraging. Okay, these are great deals. Great deals involved. They pay great commissions. Do it, but just do it properly and educate yourself on it. Okay, we want to help them negotiate the best favorable terms. And sometimes the best time for the negotiation is when they're first in the office and they're going in with you and they're getting an agreement drafted up and you're already pointing out to the sales force acting for the builder that you're looking for certain adjustments to be reduced or eliminated or capped. You're looking for assignment rights and things like that because you got to start that process then. Don't just leave it to we'll sign whatever and then we're going to take it to a lawyer to review because we got a condition. Sometimes your best opportunity to start negotiating some of these things are when you're in there, but still, always try and get it to a lawyer for review or take advantage of the 10-day cooling off period if it's a condo. Okay. So when we're dealing with assignments or potential assignments, we got to take a hard look at what the language actually is in there and make sure our clients understand that and understand potential risks involved with if there's delays in the project or cancellation. And sometimes, like I said, it's life circumstances. They may have intended to buy it for themselves, knowing it's supposed to close in 3 years. The project gets delayed, their circumstances change, and now even though they originally were buying, so now they still might want to close, but they can't close and they need to assign it. Well, if we never focused on the assignment rights, they might have zero ability to assign this, or it might be on some onerous terms imposed by the builder. So even we don't think there's going to be an assignment, we should always be putting our minds to that. And builders, sometimes do default, sometimes projects do go bad. So we do whatever due diligence we can. And that's where your role is crucial to understand what the options are, what alternate projects there might be, who's a better one to go to. Because don't forget, you're the one that's leading them. And you're leading them into this project before, you got 4 projects you might take them to. Why are you choosing? Are you choosing in a particular order? Or are you making it clear to everybody that, you prefer one builder, or you know more about one builder than another, or one project than another, or this project's already 80% sold, so the odds of it being delayed or not going through is way reduced compared to another project where you might be right in first guy in the door on the ground floor. Maybe you get the best price, but there's other risks because you never know if the project's actually going to go ahead. So making sure that you're giving all the information you can to your clients. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Sabiha. In case there's any questions, I'm happy to stick around and answer some now. You can always reach out to me privately as well. You know how to find me.
Thank you, David. And most importantly, just remember that don't run away from pre-construction, don't run away from investment assignments. There is a lot of opportunity. Builders are actually, when the market is really hot, they don't want to cooperate with realtors, right? And when they're not cooperating with realtors means people are just going to go off, sign off on documents and have no representation at all. You can direct them, and then most likely they have not reviewed the documents with the lawyers. I've over the years seen many positions where clients have put themselves in a bad position dealing directly with the builder, and then afterwards, when things are not working out, call me up to give advice, and it's a little bit too late in the day. And then I scramble and try to get Kormans involved, and this has happened multiple times over the years. So um, this is actually a good time where builders are actually involving us and more than happy to involve us. And it's that right time where you actually can protect your clients. I always come from that point of view, and you need to build your business on the point of view that we are always there to help our clients, right? We also get a fee paid to us, as does the lawyer. But remember that at the bottom of the story is that the most important thing is that you're there to help your client. The word help is important as a professional, right? So this is the right time for people to go in. We talked a little bit about this through the gala as to first-time home buyers are finding it difficult to go in, purchase property right off the bat with a hefty mortgage, and pre-construction works, right? You have all of these different tools like the first-time home buyers saving account where they can each person can save up to $40,000 per year. Um, that can be easily between a couple $80,000 per year of savings that they can put towards a deposit. So all of these things are there. First-time home buyers are finding it very tough to go into the market, and pre-construction may be a good means for them to actually become homeowners, and not right off the bat, but eventually in a year or 2 years when the project is ready and they are even more financially stable than they are today. So look into it, guys, and we're always there to direct you and help you through. Any questions at all?
I see a question in the chat.
Right. What's the cost likely to get a lawyer involved in a pre-construction from the beginning?
So that's my favorite question because, so thank you for that question. Because I always like to talk about how, lawyers getting paid. Um, so yes, I emphasize over and over again how important it is to get a lawyer involved and to get your agreement of purchase and sale reviewed. We charge a fee to review it. Our standard fee is $380 to review the agreement of purchase and sale and negotiate some changes to the extent that we can with it. That is money that would be so well spent by any potential buyer. Because for that $380, not only are we giving them protection and reviewing things that maybe they decide they don't want to go ahead with it. And don't be afraid to give it to a lawyer, even if the lawyer talks the client out of going ahead. It doesn't mean they won't go ahead with a purchase. It just may not be a purchase of this particular project or this particular unit for various reasons. Okay. But oftentimes we can just negotiate certain adjustment costs down, and we might be saving them thousands and thousands of dollars with that process. And we're charging them a $380 fee for doing that. So it's money well spent. Any lawyer that's not charging for a review of agreement purchase and sale probably isn't reviewing it very diligently or not doing a good job. The old adage is you get what you pay for. And no lawyer should be doing it for free. We can add more value to this whole process on the negotiation of the agreement purchase and sale than on closing the transaction. Okay, so it's really important on pre-construction to get it reviewed by a lawyer. So if it's not us, and you guys are very familiar with our firm, we got 5 lawyers. We jump on things quickly. If you send it to me, if I can't review it, I'm sending it out to the other lawyers. Who's got time? This has to be reviewed in 3 hours, or it's got to be reviewed by tonight, or it's got to be reviewed by tomorrow, or we got 5 days, or whatever it is. But we always find somebody that can jump on it in a timely fashion. Because it's critical to get these things reviewed. And yeah, we charge a fee for it, but it's money well earned, and every lawyer should be charging at least that. For $380, it's a bargain for the value that you get from it. And we spend a lot of time on these things. It takes a long time to read through these agreements carefully and all the schedules, and then to draft up. We do a review summary that we send to the clients and the agents. Here's the issues that we should, some things we're just pointing out to them. Are you aware of this? Are you aware of that? Here's some things that we should try and get changed. And sometimes we can get them changed. Sometimes we can't get them changed. And like Sabiha said, that's really a function of the market conditions at the time. When the market is really hot, builders take it. No, we're not changing a word. We're not giving a break on adjustments. We're not giving you any concessions on assignment rights, nothing, because we don't have to. There's a lineup and we don't have to. Those aren't the current market conditions. Right now, builders are trying to get deals in. That's why they're more agreeable to having agents involved. They're happy to get agents paid commissions, and they're more agreeable to making certain changes on adjustments and assignment rights and things like that. Okay. Market conditions change, and at some point it'll change back the other way. So we're always have to be aware of where we are in the market and where a particular project is too. Okay. When a project first opens up, first thing they want is a whole bunch of sales. So anybody comes into the sales office, sees there's a whole bunch of sales already that have taken place. As soon as they get a certain bunch of sales, they usually increase the prices. And so to get those initial group of sales, if you're able to get in on the ground floor like that, sometimes they're offering certain incentives to get those first contracts going. And so they might be giving reduced or capped adjustments. They might be offering certain other incentives. They might be giving certain assignment rights, and then they'll cut it off at a certain point because they see they've got enough market activity. And then if things slow down again, they might open it up again. So we're always looking to see where each project is in their process. Okay, when they get close to a threshold for being able to construct and they got to sell a few more units just before that, again, it opens up an opportunity. Sometimes it's on price, sometimes it's on adjustments, sometimes it's on things like assignment rights, because they want to get those last few sales in so they can get their construction financing going. So your homework, whatever you can do to find out what's going on behind the scenes, is always really critical. Um, so do your homework. You're an important part of the process, but so is the lawyer. And for $380, just to go back, we'll usually save them way more money than they're spending for the cost of our review.
Okay, thank you everyone. Thanks, David.
Okay.
See
We've
you all
got
soon.
next week. We've got
Yeah,
one
yep, we've
next
got one
Thursday.
next week, 7th, I think.
Yeah. And for those of you that haven't voted, you've got just under 6 more hours. So get out there and
Do it.
exercise democratic rights.
Bye.
Thank you.